What do you know about the MacDonald music store?
Well, I know a fair bit about it. The fellow who started it was Alan MacDonald, and he was, originally from North Grant. There were three sons that of this John MacDonald who owned the Seabird, and one of them was Alan, and he was about the youngest, and then there was Alan had a brother named Jim, and Jim owned the property which later became known as Jimtown. And the third of the sons down there was Alex, and all that family, by the way, they were known as the Dunoons because they purchased a lot which had been given by Crown Grant to the Pictou merchant, Mr. Dunoon, and they lived on that lot, and that's how they became known as the Dunoons. But anyway, he ended up at Antigonish Harbor, John, and so his three sons came from there. Now, Alan, by the way, was too young, it seems to be, to have gone to sea. If he did go to sea, it wasn't for very long. But it seems to be that he had the backing of his brothers, because he came to town and he bought a property, which is where Nice Nails is now. And that used to be MacDonald Brothers. And he put up a sort of a department store, a variety store, and one of the things that was unusual in that was that he had a counter for musical instruments. In those years, Alan MacDonald, that is, I'd say until the late 1890s, he was helped by his niece. Name did she have anyway? And she was a big help to him, and she liked the musical instruments. And when Alan's health gave way, she decided that she would cross the street. She didn't feel that she could operate the whole store. She crossed the street and she opened a smaller but completely dedicated to musical instruments. And that was around 1914, the year that Alan died. And she had a lot of things in there. She had sheet music. She had Celtic pipes, that is, smoking pipes, and she was supposed to have at least equipped one pipe band, at least, maybe one, maybe more. And then when recordings came out, she started selling them. So anyway, it was a fairly ambitious undertaking, and probably the most outstanding outlet in 5 or 6 counties. I suppose Sydney had something like that. So anyway, though, her health was not good, and I think she died in 1926. By the way, the location of that store, the building that it was located in, was known as Dufferin Hall for a long time, and or at least in its early years it was known as Dufferin Hall. That was rather pretentious because, of course, Dufferin was the name of one of our earliest governor generals, and I guess they invoked that name and didn't think his lordship would mind. So that was located near the present Bank of Commerce outlet there. Just west of that there was a building, and there was, generally speaking, a building that was divided in half. And on one side, in the most recent years, there was a confectionery there run by Veronica Macmillan, and later known as Veronica Kell. And the other side, that is the side which we think that this MacDonald music store was active, that later became the home of the McGuinness Brothers barber shop. And anyway, it's just a little bit east of the United Church. Anyway, she died in 1926 or somewhere along there. Bernie McIsaac, who had an interest in Celtic music, had been her store clerk, and he ran the place as MacDonald's Music Store. I'm not sure if it had moved up street or not. A little confused here. But anyway, Bernie decided to buy the operation, and he bought it, I suppose, from somebody who was acting as the executor of the Miss MacDonald, who was operating the place as MacDonald Music Store. And he decided to call it Celtic Music Store after that. And Bernie was the son of a guy named John McIsaac, who was early on was a bank manager and who had gone down to Port Hawkesbury with his family. And Bernie spent quite a few years in Port Hawkesbury, and his father was his father's first wife, and Bernie's mother was from Antigonish. She died at a very critical time, and John McIsaac, the bank manager, remarried, and he married a girl from Inverness County. And that gave Bernie an old tie with, you might say, a lot of the old fiddle players in Inverness County. So actually Bernie, well, business wasn't always rip-roaring or boisterous, but he managed to hang in there. One of the things that he did, and for which he deserves a lot of credit, was to start making records. And it was sort of because, well, he felt that he had a tie-in to Montreal because his brother Cyril had become friends with the fellow who ran what was supposed to be a major branch of Canada Cement, and that was there was a rather ambitious program to mine and extract and ship limestone from Harbour Centre to Montreal, and they were ready to come ahead with that when the Depression hit. And there's still the remains of some of the things which they were trying to do down at Harbour Centre, very close to where the schoolhouse used to be. I guess it's not a schoolhouse anymore. I think the building is still there and it's occupied. Anyway, Bernie thought that he should get some of the local talents together, and his very first talent was Hugh A. MacDonald. I'm going to have this right. The fellow who was known as Huey Number 11. And him and Mrs. W.J. MacDonald, Mrs. Bess MacDonald, the three of them went up to Montreal, and they were met in Montreal by Bernie's brother Cyril. And he was able to get them to, rather than for them to be completely lost, he got them to the studio. Unfortunately, the studio had a pretty good piano, and there wasn't much howdy-do to it, but the music was done, and the records were made, and Bernie ordered as much as he dared think he could sell. And I think that series of records was very, very popular. People who had any money, to have a phonograph in their house at a time when there were no radios or television, well, that was a very important thing. I mean, people would come to their house and consider that they were well entertained. So anyway, Bernie ran the MacDonald Music Store, and I should say that Colin Boyd actually went to the United States a few years before this time. I'm talking that trip to Montreal was around 1934, but Colin Boyd, he actually went down to the States and recorded some tunes, and he brought those back, and that was a few years ahead. But first Canadian-made recordings were done under Bernie McIsaac's promotion. And that continued in business at different locations, finally ending up in what we would call the Albert Whidden building, which is now Anderson's dental clinic there. And then around 1986, Bernie's health began to fail and he gave up on the business, but there was no takers for it. No one else wanted to go into that business. So that's the story of what was MacDonald's music store and what was Celtic music store.